If you're ready to take your destiny into your own hands, you've come to the right place. This is The Bulletproof Entrepreneur, featuring interviews with the most exciting and amazing entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Chi Odogu.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the show today. If you love what you hear on today's episode of the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review and a comment. It helps other great listeners like yourself find the show. And of course, you can always find more episodes of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast at www.odogwu.com. And without further ado, on with the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I have a phenomenal guest on the line today. I'm talking to Ravi Jayagopal. Ravi is a co-founder and co-developer of digitalaccesspass.com. It's a leading membership plugin and marketing automation platform for WordPress. In addition to that, Ravi has also started several other apps and tools for the internet. He's the creator of the coolcastplayer.com, the prettiest podcast player on the planet. He's also written several books, 4 books to be precise, but the one I read recently that I particularly love had to do with podcast promotions, which he talked about in depth, how to build a better podcast, everything from like having guests on the show, being a better host, being a better podcast creator and producer, as well as distribution and marketing to get you to your 1,000 true fans. So I'm pleased to have Ravi on the show to tell us a little bit about himself and his business experiences. So Ravi, welcome to the show.
Hey Chief, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Great. So Ravi, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. How did you get to start living the internet entrepreneur dream in America?
So the seeds of entrepreneurship were sown in my childhood by my father and my mother. Actually, they were both entrepreneurs, so to speak. And my father was he was in the film industry, and he was a writer and director. So he worked a lot from home when he was working on scripts.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there's some background noise coming from your end.
Okay, there's a plane going somewhere.
Okay, all right.
Give it a second.
All right.
Let it pass. And then tell me where I should start from.
Okay, no problem. So your dad was in Bollywood?
That's correct. So,
nice.
So let me start that segment. The plane has gone.
Yes.
So the seeds of entrepreneurship were sown into my head by my parents, my father and my mother, who were both entrepreneurs, so to speak. My father was in the film industry, South Indian film industry. Mm-hmm. Yes, you could loosely term it as Bollywood. Even though Bollywood is more like Bombay and Hindi movies, but it's the South Indian version of that.
Okay.
And so he used to work from home a lot, and he, while he was working on scripts, I used to see people, his assistants and everybody come home, and he would work with them for hours. Or he would just be in his office by himself. He could take a break whenever he wanted. We would go for a movie in the middle of the week, or go and randomly make up things and just go. So he would say, "You want to go here?" And then we're like, "Okay," and then let's go. Middle of the week, no thinking about, I have to ask my boss, I have to take permission to come home early. Nothing, right? Mm-hmm. He could do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. Mm-hmm. So I was spoiled by that lifestyle, and I grew up thinking, oh, I could have that too. Yeah. But it took me a long, 15 years before I could get to that point because I had to pay my dues, so to speak. So I started a couple of businesses in India. I was living back in India at the time. I started a couple of business thinking I can let the business run by itself, and then I will have time to do whatever I want. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And I had a real brick and mortar businesses. I had 2 of them, and it took up pretty much 18 hours of my time. Employees and people not calling in sick. I had to fill in for them, and so it was a constant struggle. And I had been doing a lot of online dabbling at the time, creating websites for friends. This was around 95, 96.
Oh,
I was
wow.
creating websites. Yeah, creating websites for friends and family and stuff. And then I said, you know what? I created my own website. My wife was pregnant with my daughter at the time, and we wanted to pick a name for her. So I went online, and I couldn't find any good websites. And so I decided I'll start my own website. So I started doing the research, and I went through a whole bunch of books and all kinds of scriptures and text and stuff, and then I put together a website. And that was my first website, official website back then. It was called Baby Names India. And so that's where my online entrepreneurship started. Then I was trying to sell something. Then I said, you know what? I need to sell something and make money. Back then, there was no AdSense. So I had to find a way to monetize it. So I tried to get all kinds of advertisers, and a lot of them would reject me because my site was in India and they were not catering to Indian audience at the time. And so I said, let me sell something. And so I chose one of the leading Indian books from a popular Indian author about baby names. So I wanted to sell it online. So I created a website, and I had to figure out how to do the payments, because back then PayPal was not there yet.
Yes.
I don't believe so. And then there was not the other stuff like ClickBank, and there's so many options now, like 50 options for selling online. There's Stripe and Authorize.net and everything else, but back then there was nothing.
Yeah.
And there were like 3 or 4 merchant services, and all of them refused to take on an Indian merchant because they said it's high risk. You know, we don't know if you run away with the money, we don't know what to do. We can't come there to file a lawsuit on you. So they would not accept it. And finally, I found one merchant. I don't even know the name right now. They were charging $10 a transaction. Okay.
Wow.
And 30% of the total transaction. So it's a fixed cost of $10 and a 30% fee on top of that. So if I sold something for $20, I would lose $10 right off the top, and then 30% or something like that of the $20. So another 30% of the $20 is like $6. So I would lose $16 and keep $4.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I ended up selling the book for a really high price, like 5 times the price of the book, because I had to, even then I would make like barely a couple of dollars profit. And I was the first person to sell, online and ship it all over the world from India. And a lot of people, I started getting a lot of sales because back then even Amazon didn't carry that specific book because it was not being published elsewhere. It was only being published in India. So I guess they didn't have the tie-up, or nobody had thought of, putting it on Amazon. So I was getting a lot of sales from that. And then came the other issues of the high fees I was paying. And then it would take about 60 days for them to send me the check, which means I would be owed thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And it would take me 60 days for them to send a check, which would come in the mail. After 60 days, if they sent me a check, it would take another 2 weeks for me to get it. And then I had to deposit it. And then my bank would send the check back to the U.S. To collect the payment. So it would take another 30 to 60 days from then. So I was almost like on a 4-month,
collection cycle.
Yeah, and 4 months of thousands of dollars was too much for me to handle because I had all that capital tied up. So I said, this is not working out. I have to go where the action is. And I started looking for a job at the time to get to the U.S. because I had to get a H-1B visa. So finally I found a job, and my wife also got one, and we moved here. And then from there onwards, it's been a lot easier. By the time PayPal was here, ClickBank was there, and everything opened up. And I still had to, we came here to the U.S. in 2000, and I still had to work for about 10 years, nine something years before I actually got my green card.
Yeah.
So from that point, my wife and I, we both quit our jobs, and we moved to San Diego, and we've been full-time entrepreneurs since then.
Nice. That's a nice story. So now you get to the U.S. in 2000, shortly after it's 9/11 in 2001, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we came here like 6 months before.
Wow.
Yeah, we came here in March, and the 9/11 happened later that year.
Wow. So how did that affect your transition into American life? Because you were just 6 months in there and you hadn't gotten assimilated, gotten used to everything there before you start working in earnest and then start thinking of doing a side hustle. How did that period affect you and your wife?
Oh, it affected us a lot. So basically, it was a year and a half before 9/11 happened. I think 9/11 was 2001.
Mm.
So we came here in 2000, and initially it was fine. Multiple things went wrong at the same time. It was the perfect storm of issues. So first thing was the dot-com crash happened.
Yeah.
So the dot-com company that I had been hired for, it went under. And so let me say that again. So the dot-com company that I was hired for went under. They were like the typical dot-com company back in the day, and that was the 2K rush. But I was not hired for the 2K issue. I was hired for an actual startup, internet startup, and they lost money because, like all other startups at the time, they thought, you just put up a website and you'll make millions of dollars.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. So they ran out of money, and they started laying off people, and I was one of the people to go. So I had to scramble and find another job. So I found another job in New York. We moved from New Jersey, where we stayed like almost a year. From there, we moved to New York, and then my wife also, she found a employee job. And again, we still had to stay with the consulting firm because, at least for me, because of the green card situation. And then we got an employee job as an employee where they would process our green card. And boom, 9/11 happened, and everything was put on hold. Of course, because that was one of the most difficult period for the U.S. There's such a tragedy that green card was the last thing on people's minds, and we were kind of stuck because we couldn't do anything about it. And if we left our jobs, it would mean starting the green card process all over again.
Yeah.
And they started laying off people in our company. That my wife and I, we were both working for the same company in New York. And they started laying off people because of 9/11. And economy was crashing. Everything went bad. The dot-com bust happened. The bubble exploded. So people were losing money and houses. And at the time, a lot of people, immigrants, who had just bought houses, who lost their jobs and their green card and everything else. You had a lot of reports that back in the day that people would just drive their car to the airport and just fly off back to the different country because they lost their jobs, they lost their car. They had no money to pay for new house, new car, nothing. So they had no choice, and so people were just abandoning their home and car and everything, just packing up the bag overnight and leaving the country. So it was a tough situation, and I had to end up switching a couple of companies, which actually delayed my green card process multiple times, which is why instead of taking 3 to 4 years, it took about close to 10 years for me to get a card.
Yeah, but in that time though, you still persevered. You still went through the process, even though it took 3 times longer. Because I know a lot of people that are born in the States or have citizenship or residency through family don't understand what it means to be on a H-1B visa. I know right now it's been in the news a lot because of Donald Trump planning to cancel it, but it's one of those things where it brings really highly skilled people to come and work, and it's not one of the, I hate to use the name they're using, which is like kind of getting cheap labor that Americans can, because people are actually highly skilled. I worked on a H-1B for a bit myself before I left the United States. You did also. And then that while you're in that situation, you can't just leave the job willy-nilly. You always have to be constantly performing at a high level or else you're gone. So I want people to understand that when you hear a story of somebody coming, persevering through all this and making it, it wasn't just like a walk in the park. Nothing was handed to Ravi, is what I'm trying to underscore here. Correct?
Absolutely. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of tears in a way that not literally, but sometimes literally too.
Yeah.
But it was we went through a lot of hardships, and I know that this is nothing like the hardships of people without food and water. So it's still a first world problem.
Yeah.
Of having to being forced to stay in a job. You're still making a lot of money. Most people, high 6 figures. And both me and my wife, and so we had a comfortable life, no question about that. We bought a nice house, we had a we had a couple of nice cars, and our kids were going to, even though they were going to public schools, we got the best care for them after school and everything else. So we had a good life, no question about that. But you had to go. That was, again, it was not given. Nothing was given. Everything was earned.
Everything was earned.
And it was because of our skills, our intelligence, and our ability to keep up with stuff. And we were both top performers at our jobs. So it was not. It's not like they kept us because they were sympathetic towards us.
Exactly.
We were performing at a very high level, and the problem was also that sometimes I was in a very bad situation once with a job. I had a verbally abusive boss, and I could not quit the job for 2 years.
Yeah.
Because if I quit, my green card starts all over again. So it was kind of like you're in kind of first class prison, so to speak, white collar prison. So you have all the facilities, you have the TV and everything, and the pool table in the prison, but you're still in a prison. So it was a tough thing at times, even though we had a great life, and we had to constantly revisit our priorities and see, okay, if we go back, what's in store for us?
What's in store? Yeah.
And it was not just the money, because we knew we could make money even back home going to India, but it was the lifestyle of our kids, and raising them in a better situation, better schools, and better future for them. We stay here, maybe they become citizens, and they can then decide what to do with their lives, because then they don't have to worry about 20 years from now figuring out, how do I go to the U.S.? How do I get into the top colleges or whatever? So we wanted to help them with that decision too.
Nice. I like that. So where did the spark come from for you to start creating the apps you were creating? Because you started learning code while you were on the job part-time, and then you started creating products. So walk us through your slow transition into full-time entrepreneurship with your side hustle.
Right. So the side hustle was always meant to be a full-time hustle.
Okay.
Right. So the job was more of something I had to
do to stay.
Do exactly. That's something I had to pay my dues. So I always thought of my job as the part-time thing, in the sense that even though I was working full-time and working 10, 12, 14 hours a day sometimes at my job, because I had to perform at a high level, because I can't afford to, I can't be one of the guys who just goes to and punches the clock at 9 to 5 and comes back. So I still had the competitive juice to say I have to do well at my job. I still have to do well with whatever projects I'm handling. I still have to be the top in my team. I had all those things, but that was still something that I had to just bear through in my mind, that to get to my eventual goal of being a full-time entrepreneur. Again, that, like I said earlier, it was planted in my head by my parents, who were both entrepreneurs. My mom ran a school, a full-time high school, like a kindergarten to high school school full-time. And so I wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur, and everything else was just paying my dues and my journey. Everything else was part of the journey to get to where I wanted to get to. So once I came to the U.S., the earliest thing was selling online was started with the Baby Names book, and then I said the publisher started charging me a lot of money because I was making a lot of sales for him. So he figured this guy's making a lot of money, so he jacked up the prices for me. He was no longer giving me a wholesale discount, so I had to buy it near retail. So I said, you know what? Let me create a digital version. So I wanted to create an ebook and sell it online. And I started figuring out what are the different ways to do it. I initially tried to protect it using an exe file, executable file, which only worked on Windows machines. I used to get a lot of people who bought it and said, hey, I'm on a Mac, I can't open your executable file. Because once it was executable, there was some software at the time where I could lock it and send them a license key. So I stumbled upon mistakes after mistakes and to figure out everything else. And then I said, okay, let me do the PDF version, which is most universal. But then how do you protect the PDF from being downloaded by everybody? And back then, you could easily hack anybody's download page, because PayPal, when you created a button, as part of the button, you would put the URL of the thank you page. So if you went to a website which had a PayPal button, you just did a view source. You could see that the thank you page, what the download page was, where you'll be taken after the purchase. So you could just go there and people were just downloading the stuff without paying you. So I said there has to be a better way, and that's when I created the very first download protector, I called it. So for PayPal, so PayPal download protector, which would use PayPal's APIs. I started dabbling with PHP code and databases and stuff, and that's how I just kept creating product after product. Every time I saw the need, I was active in certain forums. Back then, it was the Warrior Forum and a couple of other, Digital Point, I think, which you could go and you can see people talking about various issues. So all I had to do was put my finger on the pulse by listening to what people were saying, and I could just churn out products, because at that time I was working in a full-time job, and this was a side hobby that I absolutely loved. It didn't take any effort from me, because this is what I love to do. I love to code, and I love to learn about marketing and how to create sales pages and how to create urgency and all the elements of a sales page. So I was creating all that, and I was learning all that. So it was a absolutely fun hobby for me on the side.
I love it. So that was the birth of Digital Access Pass, correct?
Correct. Those were the elements.
Okay.
Digital Access Pass came much later in 2008.
Okay.
So these are the elements of everything I did up to then. That's what went into Digital Access Pass. So then the problem came of, the first problem I solved was how to protect content that you just sold, like a PDF or a report or a Excel spreadsheet or XLS file or MP3 or whatever. And then the next part was people would download it, and then 3 months later they would say, hey, I lost the download. Can you email it to me? So there was no members area where they could go in and download it again. Right. So the next thing was, okay, how do I create a members area for these people? So I started trying to see if I could create a homemade version. And around that time, WordPress was really popular. I had my blog on WordPress since about 2005, maybe even earlier. So I had started using, I was one of the earliest users of WordPress. So I said, WordPress is a fantastic content management system. I don't have to code all this stuff of creating the page, managing the page, linking between the page. WordPress took care of everything else, and it even allowed non-technical users to create pages, basic pages at the time, and they could change the skin, the themes, and the colors and everything else. So all I had to focus on was how to protect content within WordPress. And around that time, they released the plugins model, WordPress plugins they created, and that just took off. And then said, okay, we can create software as a plugin which plugs into WordPress, so we don't have to worry about the content management part. We just worry about the functionality part. And then that's how DApp was born. And one of the main reasons behind DApp was I used to see people, all these big marketers, doing launches all the time, and they would do a launch on, say, websitea.com, right? And then they would do this huge launch, $2,000, and sell all this internet marketing information. And then the next time they launched it, now they knew that the new people coming in, if they gave access to them to the old websitea.com, then these new people could download everything, watch all the videos, and then within a few days ask for a refund. So they ended up creating websiteb.com, right? They would create a new domain and create a fresh new site just so they can publish the content in phases so that people can just download everything on day one and leave. So that got me thinking, hey, if you can drip emails, if you have an email autoresponder, why can't you have something like that for content? So that's how I invented the concept of content responder, which is basically dripping content. So you could create content ahead of time, just like create emails ahead of time and drip them over time. So I created the concept of content dripping, where you could create the posts and pages and files and everything ahead of time, and you can set it up in a queue, and then it would drip slowly over time so that they can get everything all at once. And that's the basic idea of DApp. And from there, my wife joined along, and she was the co-founder and co-developer, and she took over like most of the coding, and she heads our entire development and support team, and so she's the face of the franchise, to speak.
And I remember you saying somewhere that once she came on board, you went from like 0 to almost 2,000% growth, which is phenomenal, because that having that latency of growth inside the business just shows you that you were onto something like very important, and then you just needed the focus to like unlock that, and that's what your wife came in and did. And then
she was she's super smart, much smarter than me. So I used to tease her back in the day that I used to tell her, if you're ever unhappy, we should start a business together, and I would be so, and whenever she was unhappy at her job, I would say your company is so foolish because, you're the type of person I would want to work with, if I ever start a business. So, and then later on she joined, and it was like the perfect storm, and she just took over, and from day one started developing new stuff, and the support was there, and we were like killing it. And I could not do much because I was still at a job, because I was not sure of how well this would do. And then 6 months later, once we saw the growth, we said, you know what, we have to dive both feet in.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. So what brought you into the world of podcasting? Because you have your own show at the subscribeme.fm, but what led you in to start writing books and then creating content in form of podcast?
So my first book came in 2007, and it took nearly 4 years or something to write, because back then I had a full-time job. I was working, long hours. So every day I would write like one page. And then I got a job in New York City, and I started commuting by train. So I would get like 45 minutes to an hour each way. So then my book started moving faster. I would write 45 minutes to an hour on my laptop. And then, so basically every time somebody came to me and said, hey, what is it you do? Can you tell me how, like a friend or a family member, those questions started getting more and more. How do you do this? How do you do that? What can I do online? What can I sell? So I said, you know what, I got to put all this. And I think it was my brother-in-law at the time who first gave me the idea, said, you should write a book someday. And that was a long time ago. And then one day it eventually popped into my head and said, you know what, I got to go through with this. And I started writing a book, and it took me 4 years or so, but I finally got it out. There was no Kindle back then, so I started, I published it as a real book. And that was a fantastic experience for me. And around the same time, I think 2004, 2005, I started listening to podcasts. Back then, I didn't have an Apple device. I had a Zune. I had all kinds of other media MP3 players. And so I used to listen to this show called Leo Laporte, the tech guy. You might have heard of it. He's still one of the biggest podcasts and online shows. And he talks about technology and phones and this and internet and everything else. So I started listening to his show, and I always loved the talk show format. Right from when I was a child. We used to get a couple of channels. CNN was one of them, and I used to love the Larry King show. And I used to love the way, you could just sit down and have a deep conversation. And in my mind, I always wanted to be the guest, not the host. So because I always felt like it would be cool for me if somebody called me as a guest rather than me calling somebody and having them advise me and stuff like that. So I was more fascinated about the person sharing the information, right? So then I said I could do both, right? I could also talk to people I love and talking to people from whom I can learn. And I can also, even if nobody calls me on their show, I can still have my own platform to talk about stuff that I want to talk about, like digital marketing. I was never much of a rah-rah guy where I talk about mindset on stuff. I had all that thing, and I had the mindset, I had the passion, I had the commitment. So I was not very much into advising people on mindset, but I wanted to teach people on specifics, on how to do a specific thing. So given my background in creating code and content protector and download protectors and protecting content, ripping content, everything to do with digital marketing and content delivery, I said, you know what, my podcast has to be about the same subject, and because it makes sense to extend in the same direction as what I'm already an expert in, rather than going into a new niche and trying to become an expert there. So that's how I started and many years after listening to podcasts, and finally I think 2015, I said, you know what, it's time, because until then I had other priorities, working on DAP and everything else. So then I said, I got to start my own podcast, and that's how subscribeme.fm came into being.
Nice. I love it. And I know when you started your podcast, you initially had sponsors. You made sponsorship money from sponsorship, but then you stopped that almost immediately to focus on selling your own products and your own services and selling coaching and consulting. So my question is this. Well, first of all, before we even get to that, I want you to share the story of your meeting Ryan Dice and how that came about, and why that drove you to start selling your own products and services as opposed to being just a creator.
Right. So this is one of the most interesting stories, especially if you know Ryan Dice. And unfortunately, we buried the lead there by giving away the name. But now that you know the name, it's still an interesting story. So back in around 2001, 2002, I had this baby name site, right? And I had created my own contact us form. Mm-hmm. That's how primitive the web was back then. So think about that. If you needed a contact us form on your website, you had to hire a programmer.
Yeah.
Because there was no easy way to create a form, put it on, and get it emailed to you, because there was no WordPress plugins, so to speak. So nothing you could do yourself. You had to literally buy code from somebody else and put it in yourself, or you could hire a programmer to create it and install it on your site, because you had to open the PHP file and say, where should this email be sent to? You had to customize the script. So I created a script for myself. And so this kid, I didn't know he was a kid at the time. So this guy emails me and through that contact us form, and says, hey, I love the contact us form on your site. Would you be willing to give it to me? Mm-hmm. Sell it to me, right? Until that time, it never once occurred to me in my head that I could actually sell this stuff. I was so focused on creating the baby name site, improving it, selling more, promoting the link so I could sell more products by more of the digital version, the PDF, and how to get in front of other sites. I was focused on SEO, on article writing, and all these other things, except the fact that there was a gold mine right there in front of my eyes, and I never recognized it. So that was the first time I was like, oh, I could do this. So I just looked up online and to see what other people were selling it for. There was like some people were selling it for 20 and 50 and like that. So I said, okay, 30. So I said, okay, let's send it. I'll sell it to you for $30. And he said, okay, done. So he sent me the payment. I don't remember how he's sent, probably PayPal. Mm-hmm. And that's when I had to take the script on my site and add comments to it, like change this email address below to point to your email address where you want the contents of the form to be sent and stuff like that. So I figured out how to make it easy for other people to install a script on their site. So soon thereafter, the same kid comes to me, and that by the time I already knew by chatting with him online that he was in college. He was in like second or third year of college or something. Mm-hmm. And he was trying to become an online entrepreneur. And he started a website which was like a resources thing, which had links to a lot of different websites. And so he says, hey, check out this website, and he sends me to a website where once you go there, as soon as you go to the website, you get this pop-up. It is not a HTML pop-up. It was a JavaScript. You know how when you're filling out a form, mm-hmm. if you make a mistake, it gives you an alert saying, yeah, okay, cancel. That's called a JavaScript alert. Okay. And so you got this JavaScript alert on this website, and as soon as it said, hey, would you like to join our email list? You said okay or cancel, and if you said okay, it would open up the email client on your website. So back then it was Eudora or Outlook, so it was not a web-based thing. There was no Aweber. Maybe Aweber was there, but there was no easy way to do these things, and it was not popular and super expensive. So this was like the basic of the basic, really low-tech way of accepting an email, because if you said okay, it would open up your email client on your computer, mm-hmm. which is Eudora or Outlook or whatever it was you're using at the time, and it would pre-compose this email. So it's basically a mail to link in today's world. Yeah. If you clicked on it, the email client opens with the to email already filled in, and you just hit send, right? And then the person would take your email and add it to a list and stuff like that. So he said, can you create something like that? So I said, of course, I've created something like this before. So I customized it a little bit, and I think I sold it to him for like $50. Okay. And then we were talking, we were chatting, and he said, I'm trying to create something like this of my own. I need a product of this, because back then he was dating his now she's his wife, but back then she was his girlfriend. And he was like, I need to make money soon. I want to buy an engagement ring for my girlfriend. I want to propose to her. So he was looking for business opportunities. So at that time I said, you know what? Why don't you? By the time, white label and private label rights, these were all big things back then. You could create something and you could sell private label resell rights to other people and make money. So I said, I'll sell you the resell rights to the script. You can sell it on your own. So and he said, how much? So I said, $500. So he was a kid and he thought about it and he said, okay, I'll pay you. So he paid me $500. And then before that, I forgot to mention. So when I did the first script for him, contact us, and he installed it. It worked so well. So he sent me a tip. So on a $30 script, he sent me like $10 because he was so happy with it. Works right away. Yeah. And I had never gotten a tip before that in my life because I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. So, but I was so thrilled that somebody would think that it's so cool that he was happy with me and he would send this money even without being asked. So that was his mindset. So he was an entrepreneur, budding entrepreneur even then. So later on, I selling the resale rights for my script for $500. And I'm like, yes, I convinced somebody. So I'm like, my chest is puffed up. I'm thinking I'm this really cool marketer dude who like did something phenomenal, and wow, I'm so proud of myself, kind of thing, right? And then 2 days later, all these email lists that I'm signed up to from different people, I see this guy promoting. He renamed the script that I had sold him, and he started selling it. Wow. And he probably made like $5,000 within like a week. I was like, dude, I had the script. I wrote the script. I never once thought of approaching other people to do a partnership and sell it. And this guy, he was going all around town. He was talking about it. He was publishing, and he was writing articles, and he created entirely a new website about it. And he was partnering up with email list owners. And I was on those lists, and I was getting those emails with the buy links to buy, and people were going nuts. Wow. And I was like, I created this, and this guy's killing me. He made like 20 times what I thought I made from him. Yeah. And that's when I realized, there's a different mindset for somebody who's a marketer versus somebody who's a creator. So if you're always in, the same thing they talk about, are you going to create the shovels or are you going to dig for gold? Yeah. So I was always in a create shovels for the gold miners mentality. Yeah. And it probably worked during the gold rush because this guy sold a lot of things. But guess who really, really, really became rich? The guys who struck gold, actual gold, right? Yeah. So you always have to, of course, not everybody has the same mentality as me because I was a developer and a geek, programmer. So everything I wanted to create that on my own instead of just using that thing and marketing it and making money. So it took me a while to learn that lesson. Yeah. But even now, there are people who will rather just keep researching about tools. Oh, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better podcast host? Is there a better membership plugin? What else can I do? So instead of just implementing what they know and just running with it and just nonstop massive action in actually promoting it, because in today's world, people don't need more content, right? Yeah. There's so much content on Facebook, so many people with lead magnets and reports and everything else, and you can constantly get lost in creation and forget that you need to promote it too. Yeah.
No, that is a phenomenal lesson because it just shows you that sometimes you need to step out of just being the person that moves the needle, or what I call it,
being the expert.
Being the expert, and just be the front man, be the talker, be the marketer, and start getting yourself and you're getting your product out there, because that's the only way you'll know that it can be viable as a business, and it can also generate enough income for you to achieve your dreams and your lifestyle. I really love that lesson. So you do that, you start your own podcast, and then you know what? Like I said, you had sponsors and you gave that up, but you got coaching clients for that. So I'm looking right now at your ebook, and it said because of your podcast, you were able to get sales of $21,000, and then revenue from coaching clients $15,000, and affiliate commission 2,200. So tell us a little bit about how the podcast helped you get coaching clients, because I'm sure a lot of people listening now will say, oh man, she hosts a podcast show, Ravi has a podcast show. If I open a podcast and start hosting and interviewing people, how am I going to be able to monetize this?
Right. So there are two ways to monetize your podcast. And a lot of people get stuck on number one, which is making money from your podcast directly. And I say that there's a difference between making money from your podcast versus making money because of your podcast.
Yeah.
And making money from your podcast is where most people focus all their attention on. They say, okay, they see all these big podcasters with a lot of sponsors on their shows, and they say, okay, if I can get 10,000 listeners and I charge $10 a CPM, that's $100 per episode. And if I do 5 episodes a week, it's $500 a week and $2,000 a month. So they just make up all these numbers, and it's actually not very practical to just make money using sponsors, because it's really hard to get, for the average show, it's very hard. You may not even have that much of an audience, depending on what kind of a show you're doing. You can't look at the big shows and say, okay, I'll also do an interview podcast, because there's so many interview podcasts, right? Everybody is doing an interview podcast. So how are you going to set yourself apart?
Yeah.
Right. And not everybody is a talented host like you are, right? You're asking such great questions and keeping me involved and engaged and telling great stories. Not everybody is able to do that. So just everybody who thinks that they can start an interview podcast and get a lot of traffic, they forget, regardless of what format your podcast is, the hardest part is still promoting the show.
Yes.
Getting your name in front of other people. Because if you start a podcast show, right, entrepreneur podcast show, how are people going to find you? So reverse engineer the process first. Think about what people will need to search for in order to find you. So if you say, I'm going to start an entrepreneur podcast show, if you go on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or any other thing and say entrepreneur interview, you're going to get like 100 different podcasts before you even shows up. And because there's a lot of different algorithms used in how many, especially with Apple Podcast, about how many lifetime subscribers your show has gotten. So you have to do it's like a podcast SEO.
Yeah.
So you can't just launch a website and show up number one on Google. Similarly, you can't launch a podcast and show up high in the top of the search results on a podcast app. So, and no matter how much you promote it on Facebook in just your network, they'll get tired of it at one point. And
yes.
And even if you have like 5,000 friends, not everybody's interested in your podcast. They may not be entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
And people will love to comment on personal photos and cat videos and dog videos, but they will not listen to your podcast.
Yes.
So you can't force your podcast on your friends, Facebook friends. So the problem becomes how to promote your podcast. So that's where a lot of people fail, because they're thinking, if my podcast doesn't hit big numbers, then I can't get sponsors. And how else do they make money? And they fail at that, and they part fade and they get disappointed. But a better way to do it is use your podcast as a way to connect with your potential customers, because you now have something to sell. Because the only way to really make money, you may not make enough money to retire rich, not like hitting a lottery, but you can still make a good enough money if you can find 1,000 true fans.
Yes.
Which is a famous article. I forget the name of the author, but
Kevin Kelly.
Kevin Kelly, right. So I talk about it a lot in my books and my podcast. I'm a huge fan of Kevin Kelly and his concept of 1,000 true fans, where the idea is you don't need 100,000 people, you don't need millions of users, you just need 1,000 true fans. And I'm actually a living example of that, because when we started DAB, and we did not have we still don't have millions of users, right? We don't even have hundreds of thousands of users. We have tens of thousands of users. And so you can create a very nice life for yourself and your family if you can create something that at least 1,000 people will need. And that's all you need. If you create something that 1,000 people pay $100, even just a year. Think about it, very low end. If 1,000 people pay $100 a year, that's a good living, right? For most people, $100,000 is a pretty decent living. Then from there, you don't have to stop there. You can, create more products to sell. You can increase the price. You can increase the conversion. You can increase the traffic, and you can easily turn 100 into 500 and a million and so on. But you can at least start with a nice lifestyle. If you want to be an entrepreneur, and if you want to quit your job, then it definitely starts with, at least when it comes to a podcast, it starts with having products and services behind your podcast so that you can make money because of your podcast.
So give us an example of the products and services. Well, apart from DAP, which we know, like your consulting and your coaching, what exactly do you coach and consult people that approach you because of your podcast?
Right. So in the podcast, I'm constantly trying to prove my authority, right, and expertise. I'm trying to show that I can help people with their own website. If they want to start a membership site, I have DAP. We can help you set it up. I can coach you through it. And if you already have a membership site, some of my clients is basically what they're doing is not all of them are DAP users, but I'm helping them with take their business to the next level by helping them. Sometimes people, like, you basically go through the whole funnel, start to finish, and you coach them through, okay, looking at your website, is it structured? That's the basic thing, right? Is it structured the right way?
Yeah.
Is the copy good? Do you have a sign-up form? Do you have all the sales elements that is needed to convert people? Sometimes people's homepages will be a blog, right? So when you go to domain.com, it'll be a blog, and blog is not a selling tool, right? Blog is a content marketing tool. It's your homepage has to be a sales page, right? If you want to sell stuff, you cannot send people to your blog, because if you sell them to your blog, they'll read your blog and go.
Yes.
Unless your blog, everything in all the content in your blog is geared towards selling your main product. Again, most people don't do that.
Yes.
So it's not just about telling people, oh, I have a blog here, but you have to have a sales page. And before you have a sales page, you need to have a product to sell. So what is the product that you can create, and what's that you can deliver, and for which what are the benefits and the features, and selling the benefits, not the features. So I go through the whole process with them, right from starting from their website, their marketing efforts. How are they marketing? Are they building an email list? What are their autoresponders look like? And trying to address their whole marketing and product development too. Sometimes we look at the products and say, okay, why are you creating so many features? Why don't you stop now and ship this version right now and see how it goes? Sometimes people will go and work on something for a year before ever showing it to anybody. Even with the podcast, people will say, I'm going to release with 20 episodes or 10 or 8, whatever. It doesn't make sense. Launch with 1, right? And you have to get feedback. So how do you find people who are interested in your product? How do you approach them? How do you create the MVP or minimum viable product? So we address I look at their businesses end to end, all aspects: email, autoresponder, sales page, copy, sales elements on their website, and their email list building efforts, and social media marketing, and what payment process are they using, what is the sales funnel, where do people go, what's their lead magnet, is the lead magnet good enough? So I address everything end to end. And I have not been promoting my coaching services into my DAP use clients, because they're already coming to us anyway. And so I don't need to separately promote it. But on my podcast, I have my own platform, so I talked about it a few times, and I straight away got 2 clients. The very first day I announced it, I got 2 clients, and each of them paying $2,000 for my coaching. And obviously I have different tiers of coaching, and one is cheaper, one is more expensive. So the couple of them picked the middle option because of all the benefits that it came with and how much time they got with me and stuff. So podcast is such an amazing authority and relationship building tool, because on one side, they're listening to you with their headset. So you're in their ears, right? You're in their head, so talking to them. obviously you got to be good and you got to provide good content.
Yes.
Not going to listen to junk. But once you can provide them that, and you every time you make them think, laugh, cry, whatever it is your podcast is about, if once you can connect with them and they feel the value of what you bring to the table, then they're much more deeply connected with you than, say, if they were to just read one of your blog posts, right? Text is very impersonal, but a podcast is much more personal. And obviously, video is the best in terms of engagement because they can look at you, they know what you look like.
Yes,
but unfortunately, video you can't watch a video when you're driving.
Yeah.
You could, I guess, but you would not. You'll end up in the hospital, and hopefully, it maybe hurt others too. So you don't want to do that, and you can't watch a video when you're doing something else, washing the dishes, or going for a run, or you're at the gym, or taking your dog for a walk. So that's why audio is so powerful. It has almost all the benefits of a video, except for the visual cues, but it also has the more personal, long form nature, offline nature that cannot be matched by any other medium. And I believe that's why podcast is so much more powerful, and that's why it's got me more coaching clients than any other media.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. There was something I was going to ask you, but okay, yeah. So that brings me to your wonderful product, which is Coolcast Player. So I saw the promotion you put up on Facebook in one of the groups we were in, and I just took a look at it, and I love the product. So tell us a little bit about the development of that, and how is it going and growing? Because it's one of the most beautiful looking players I've come across for anyone who's doing an audio-based platform like a podcast show.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. So again, this goes back to my curse, my blessing and my curse of wanting to constantly create the shovel rather than digging the gold.
Yeah.
So when I started my podcast in September, or at least when I thought about starting a podcast around September 2015, I was looking for players, right? And then I saw a couple of good players, actually only one good player at the time, and the rest were all really very basic. Some were ugly. And if you go to coolcastplayer.com, in the video I show you, actually even on the screenshots, I have all the ugly players that people, web hosts, offer by themselves. And I said, there's no way that this is the market for players. There's got to be something better. I kept searching and I couldn't find anything. I was like, wow, this is such an underserved market. And I said, being the hacker guy, the developer guy, I said, you know what, this is a great market to create something new in. And that's when I created Coolcast Player, which is a WordPress plugin. And knowing, everything that I already had a similar plugin. I had already created one called S3 Media Vault, which integrates with, this is for membership site owners who want to create an audio file and put an audio player in the membership area, and they want to host it on Amazon S3 because then you will have security. So people cannot pass around the MP3 link. It's secure. It only works from the members area and so on. So I'd already created something similar, but it was not for a podcast. So when I started the podcast, I realized the need for an actual feed player so that whether you're hosting with Libsyn or Podbean or any of the famous ones, Blueberry, SoundCloud, you wanted a nice feed player that would put your entire playlist on your homepage so that they don't have to click from page to page to page just to listen to 5 episodes. You want everything in one playlist and you want it on your homepage. So that's what I wanted to create. And so I took elements of the previous plugin and I added the podcast features, and that's how coolcastplayer.com came in. And it has the ability to both create the feed player for your entire podcast feed, as well as individual players. And it also has the Amazon S3 protection feature, where if you want to put a player, nice, beautiful player in the members area of your membership site. So if somebody has paid for your audio or your audiobook, and you want to put a few audio players in the members area only to be accessed by paying members, then you can do that too with Coolcast Player.
Great. I love it. So as we're on the top of the hour, I want to wrap up the show real quick and just get your final words of wisdom, because we've really talked a lot, and I could stay with you and talk for hours, and I just want to respect your time. So Given everything you've said thus far about your entrepreneurial journey, I've told you that this show is listened to by people in their early stage of their entrepreneurial journey, seeking to either start their first business or to transition from corporate into entrepreneurship. So what's the one thing you think you could have done better if you could go back in time to do it all over again?
Move to the US sooner. No, I'm just kidding. But you have to know I think figuring out what you want to do is the hardest part for millennials these days.
Yeah.
My daughter, she's a second year in college. She's reading computer science and engineering. So I know what kids these days are thinking. They're not sure. There's so many opportunities. At the same time, so many things that used to be easier in years before are harder now.
Yes.
Because back then, if you had a video course, it was a big deal. You were one of the few thousand people. Now you're one of the few 100 million people who have a video course or a membership site or a podcast. There's 500,000 podcasts compared to when I started listening, there were probably 20,000 podcasts.
Yeah.
So everything is harder, but the blessing is there's so many more tools. There's no Facebook back then. There's no YouTube. There's no Twitter to market. There's no AdSense. There's no to monetize. There's just like a million more ways to sell stuff, make money online. So while the competition has gotten bigger, the tools have also gotten so much easier. A lot of them are free. Google Analytics, things you could not even imagine. Even if you paid for, you could not get back then. But they're all available. A lot of them are free, and you could, with a couple of $100, you could start a great online business. You don't need a lot of capital, and you can hire people from these freelancing sites for really cheap. You don't have to hire somebody straight away for hundreds of thousands of dollars. You start with, $20, $50, $100 an hour, and you can get people to do freelancing. So the opportunities have increased and the competition has increased, but the ability to shine has also increased. Very few people are doing, going all the way. A lot of people are just worried about, their Snapchat or Instagram or looking good and taking nice pictures of themselves. Very few people are going to the next step of, what is the point? What am I building an audience for? So obviously, if you're in college, you still have the luxury of, creating content for friends and family. But once you come out, the next step would be to figure out what is it that you want to do. Do you want to be an infopreneur? And start small. Don't try to be a mega startup, raise funds from investors. Don't worry about all that. Start with $50. Get a domain. Hosting is easy. WordPress is so simple. There are drag and drop plugins, or use one of these SaaS programs to create something really quick and test it and test the concept. It is so easy to run Facebook ads for starting with a few dollars and test the concept and build a list right from day one. That's probably my biggest regret is. I did build a list, right? So when I launched DAP in 2008, I had about 1,200 people. Today we have over 100,000 people in our list.
Wow.
But even then, 1,200 was happened because I started building a list by putting a form, but I never really focused on building a list and I did not spend hours and hours and hours figuring out how to increase my list. I just put up a form, and whoever signed up signed up. It was not the focus. So I would say. Build a list, test your product concept really quick. Try to participate in Facebook groups, not just posting junk on Facebook, saying, reply with a GIF how you're feeling right now. Or don't post, time wasting stuff. It can suck up your whole day, and you end up with accomplishing nothing. Instead, go join specific groups on topics that you are interested in, or you're interested in the products that you're creating. So I used to go to the Warrior Forum a long time ago and learn about what people's challenges are. So go where your potential audience is hanging out, talk to them, start a podcast, and start a blog only because not to become rich with your podcast sponsorship, but because it'll allow you to come up with the ideas and thoughts and be able to streamline your thoughts. And once you go into these forums, figure out what their challenges are, try to answer their questions, try to learn from them, see what people are concerned about, and see if you can create a product or service along those lines. Start small. Don't worry about making millions of dollars. Those things will come. Start small. dream big, but start small. That's my.
Yes, and I love that statement because you can almost start a podcast for $50. Get with domain name, getting the art, intro,
Yeah, you buy a
outro,
cheap
and
mic.
host.
You don't even. That's the thing. You don't even need an intro outro.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
true.
you start the podcast saying, "Hey, my name is so and so. This is the podcast."
True.
Some of the best podcasts I listen to don't have any music in the beginning.
Yes.
They just get right into the show, and you can, even if you want music, you can get it for $10 on Audio Jungle, and you can just plug it in. Nice guitar music or jazz or whatever you like, rock. You can just put it in, and 5 seconds later, get into the meat of the content. People don't care about too much fancy stuff anymore. Nobody has the time. Right? Even I have a podcast episode about that as well, saying why most webinars suck. You can take a look at it on subscribeme.fm. I talk about how people take so long to get into the actual content.
True.
Even with YouTube videos, there's 10, 15 seconds of music in the beginning. I don't care. Tell me what I need to know. And then when they get in if it's a video about showing how to do some software, use this feature of a software product, they'll talk for 5 minutes about why they need the software. I'm like, dude, I'm already using this software, so you don't need to tell me why I need it. Tell me about the feature that you promised that you would tell me, right? Or how to use it. So if you are doing a how-to video or pretty much anything, get right into the meat. Don't talk for 10 minutes about the weather on your podcast. Don't give long, extended intros. Get to the point real quick. Cut to the chase. That's actually one of my other podcasts.
Yeah.
So cut to the chase is important.
Yeah. Great. And the final question for the day is, what are your favorite tools, books, software, forums that have helped you become a better entrepreneur over the years?
Book tools, of course, WordPress, right? And I use Camtasia Studio, which I use for creating videos, and I also I record my podcast also using Camtasia, and I use auphonic.com, which is 2 hours free every month to boost my audio, and it removes noise and levels the soft audio and stuff like that. And there's so many more. I use Dreamweaver, Adobe Dreamweaver.
You're still using Dreamweaver?
For my PHP code, yeah.
Okay.
Not for HTML. Yeah.
Okay.
Nowadays you don't need to dabble with HTML at all.
Yeah.
Because of WordPress and other tools. But I do use. It used to be Camtasia, something else, Macromedia, Dreamweaver. Now it's Adobe. I guess that those are the main tools. I use powtoon.com, which is for creating animated sales videos and for presentations. Of course, digitalaccesspass.com, which is the membership plugin. That's so WordPress and DApp are the two big ones that I use myself.
Yeah.
DApp allows you to accept payments, automate the membership site, create the members area, give them access to login and password and self-serve and different courses and different all the good stuff. And then Coolcast Player, of course, for the podcast player and audio player. And let me see. And it's so easy to use Word, Microsoft Word or something equivalent, and convert it to a PDF. Now you have a Kindle book. You can write a Kindle book in 3 hours.
Yeah.
Today. It doesn't have to be 200 pages long. If you can tell me specifically one thing that I can do well and write it in 30 words. 30 pages. You have a fantastic book. So go and put it out there. Put out a podcast. Put out a Kindle book. Put out a blog, and do when everybody else is zigging, you zag.
Zag, yeah.
So those are some of the tools, I guess, and there's so many in my online arsenal. I can't even think of everything right now.
Okay.
So WordPress, DApp, and Camtasia and Powtoon would be the main ones, I guess.
Yeah. Great, love it. And as we're at the end of the show, I really want to thank you for coming to share your words of wisdom, talk about your business and your experience, Ravi. So tell us, where can people find you and get to know more about you, and of course, test out or possibly even buy some of the products you have?
Sure. So you subscribeme.fm. So that's my podcast website. If you go there, you can contact me from there. You can take a look at my handsome face on the homepage, and you can listen to my podcast right there on the homepage through the audio player. And I have listed all my reports, my free reports, my paid reports, my Kindle books, my software products. Everything is listed on that page. So subscribeme.fm is the best place to reach me.
Great, and I'll link to that in the show notes once this podcast goes live. So thanks a lot for coming to share your story, Ravi. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know it's a bit over the hour, but when you're having fun, time flies.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, and great questions. They're also interesting. That's why we could keep talking for hours, I guess. And that's the thing about being passionate about something, when people can't get you to shut up, right?
Yeah.
So once you get me going, I could keep talking for hours, and until somebody says, "Okay, we're over the time. Time to stop now. Get back to work."
Yeah.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the show today. If you love what you hear on today's episode of the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review and a comment. It helps other great listeners like yourself find the show. And of course, you can always find more episodes of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast at www.odogwu.com.